All right, well, here we are. We are at Comms vNext in Denver, Colorado. And so my name is Christian Buckley with Rencor and with Techie Gurus and Collab Talk. This is the post-Collab Talk Tweet Jam, the monthly tweet jam that we do around collaboration topics. And joining me today, I'll kind of let everybody introduce themselves, but to my left, and we'll just go across.
Great. I'm Sherry Oswald. They call me Shortcut Sherry. I'm a productivity specialist, and I am the Chief Experience Officer for Power Up Learning.
Hi, I'm Sharon Weaver. I am the founder and owner of Smarter Consulting, which is an IT consulting company that helps people solve business and technology problems. I am also a Microsoft Regional Director and a Microsoft MVP.
And I'm Adam Ball, one of the co-founders of Comms vNext, as well as a Microsoft MVP for Microsoft Teams.
Well, thanks everybody for joining, and I know that these are, some of well, everybody on this panel like regularly participates in different topics that are out there. And if you don't know what a tweet jam is, so they've been actually running since January of 2012. So it's a monthly topic on Twitter, hence the name Tweet Jam, where it's wide open, anybody can participate, but there's always a panel of experts around that topic. And so we've got, I think my list is about 250, 300 regulars that will come in and out depending on the topic. And so the topic this month the title of it was Throwing Productivity Tools for a Loop. And of course you can find the blog post out on my personal blog, which is buckleyplanet.com. And this was really around having fun with the name. The loop is the name. But nobody I think brought up today Microsoft Loop, but there was a lot of talk about AI and Copilot and those capabilities. But it's basically just a topic talking about how productivity is changing, what we see changing in how we're using productivity technology today. So that's where I want to jump right into. We're going to go through the 7 questions covered during the tweet jam, and love to get let's have a conversation around each one of them. So let's start off. First question was, how will Microsoft's investment into OpenAI and ChatGPT change the way that your organization looks at individual productivity? Anybody want to jump in? Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors, who jumps in? Also, so I didn't do this in my intro, but because I'm obviously here at Comms vNext as part of the community and helping lead it, but from a day job perspective of leading a company that helps people implement Microsoft Teams, my expectation is that my team will start using those tools to become more productive. It's not cheating. I think that's the biggest thing that I want my team to take away is it's not cheating if you say, how do I do this? And you type it into ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever tool, AutoGPT. If it can give you back something that you can then take and you just skipped an hour's worth of ruminating at the blank sheet of paper, that's huge.
I'm looking forward to, we were talking about this in the Women in Teams session yesterday. Here's an entire transcript of a meeting. Whittle it down to what I need to get done, because otherwise, trying to scribble away and take notes, you miss them. And I always took my own notes because I would get the notes from somebody else, and I'm like, were they in the same meeting I was in? Because they were probably trying to capture all of those ideas. And for it to go in and look for phraseology that flags it as a task, like Outlook used to do. Outlook started doing this, like, I think you have a task in here. I'm excited for that. I think it's going to really take away a lot of the busy work in the job.
I think my team is super excited for that for me because I suck at taking notes. And they're all like, wait, if you can just get the transcript and have the meeting notes summarized for us, and then you send that on to us, and we don't have to depend on your notes anymore, don't take any more notes, please.
I love there's a cartoon that was just 2 panels, very simple, with one side with a person sitting in front of a computer monitor and was talking to somebody who's standing behind them saying, isn't this great? I can take these 3 points that I want to make, and using the AI will expand it out into a narrative describing what it is that we're going to do. And then in the next panel it says, isn't it great? I can take this email I just received with all of this information and condense it down to 3 bullet items that I need.
Yeah,
out of that, like there's a lot of, I think that's where expectations are for that it's going to help with that personal productivity. But I want to key in on a point you made about it's not cheating. Because I think a lot of people go right there. It's like, well, it's generating, it's pulling from content all over the place, and so it's giving something that you didn't create.
I think the answer is if you're trying to take something and saying, oh, I've created this, I've put the blood, sweat, and tears into it, that's a gray area for sure, if not outright. Like, it's like the photographers who are using the auto AI to generate these amazing, what looks like a photograph, but it's not. But it's a new style of art, honestly, in some of that ways. So I don't necessarily look at it as cheating. It's now the thing that you have to be careful about is don't take everything carte blanche. It's not just here it is, and I just asked ChatGPT the question and I gave it back to you. You still have to proof it. You still have to validate it. So you still have to know what you're doing with it. You've just skipped the middle 80% of the effort.
Right. Well, it is interesting that, and I had this issue where I went and I asked it I was asking a question. I was saying provide references. Every single one of the links and every one of the references was a dummy link. It went nowhere. It wasn't a real thing, or it was pointing to technology which is gone. Yeah. Things like that. But so the way that I've used it is idea generation. The other side of it is, on the cheating question, because some of the platforms out there, just the name of it slipped my mind, that I experimented with, but also had a plagiarism checker built into it.
Yep.
So even though it's drawing from those sources, it is also making sure that it is not taking a one-for-one and plagiarizing that of the content. It's taking the ideas and the themes, which are what we want. But so, what are the other, from a personal productivity, any other concerns or issues?
I think it's just great that it helps people to find inspiration. So to your point, it gets you started. And I think, when you think about like even the cheating comment, it's like how many people go do a search for something when they're starting to think about working on something, or they go look at other people's stuff. And so I think the idea from a productivity perspective of not having to spend the time kind of digging through what's out there to see, is this relevant? Is it the right thing? I think, being able to just be like, hey, give me information, give me this, start this for me. It really assists with kind of getting you there. So I think for my team, I'm really excited because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So being able to go, just say, hey, I need this, and it'll go get it for you, I think just cuts to the chase for that.
It's a new skill set.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, I just thought of this too, is when I was 19, I was a runner for a law firm. So working with the law firm, I thought back then one of the coolest things was got to be friends with a couple of the senior attorneys there, as they would take something, this complex data, hand it to one of the paralegals or one of the assistants and say, basically summarize this for me. And so they'd spend days going through that and come up with like a 2-pager outlining that. And it's essentially, now we all have that assistant to go in and do that. That's incredibly powerful.
Well, and think about instructions. So, a lot of times people are working on things and they don't know how to do something. They don't know what to do. So not even just creating content and pushing it out, but I want to know how to do something. Instead of having to go find the steps to do something and knowing whether those are even outdated or not, if I can go to one place and say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me how to do this. Yeah. And it can say step 1, 2, and 3. Think about productivity at the level of it giving us instructions.
Think of the time savings alone with IKEA instructions.
That's awesome.
Decipher this for me. Tell me.
Absolutely.
How do you
But those are all pictures.
What is the flugelhorn? I can't find something that's called flugelhorn in there.
The whatchamajigger is missing.
So, second question. Which roles do you think will be most impacted by AI-powered productivity improvements, both positively and negatively, and why? Why will they be impacted?
For sure, content creators.
Yes.
Anybody where content creation is at the core of what they do.
Negative or positive?
I think it's going to be both. I think overall, I think it's going to make it easier because you're not starting from a blank sheet of paper. You have something to kind of get you going. And I don't care what role you're in, if you're writing, if you're an artist, if you're a developer, if you are pushing out content, I think it definitely gives you kind of a head start. Mm-hmm. But I think from a negative perspective is that you cannot trust the AI to make it for you the way you would do it at 100% correct and perfection way. You have to then take the time to groom it and make sure it's what you want it to be. Even if I say, create me this fantastic art masterpiece, right? Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to mold that and I'm going to groom that to what it is I want. So I think there's kind of a pro and con, but content creators for sure.
I 100% agree with that. And as a content curator, I'm constantly struggling for what am I going to do my next Tip Tuesday on? What am I going to do a webinar on? What are the top 5 things that people search for in Office? It hands me my topics. How awesome is that? Otherwise, I've got to assume a lot, or it's from my perspective, and my experience is not your experience. Is not your experience. Is not anybody else's experience. So, what I think is important, people are like whatever, and I need to know what are people searching for.
Yeah, slightly different take on that, just because if you read my blog, you know that I don't pay attention to what the themes are or whatever. I write about what I want to write about, and sometimes I hit, sometimes it misses. Maybe that's why it's not grown more than it maybe should. And so this has caused me to think more about SEO and thinking about what are the kind of the trends that are out there. Do I have the right keywords? Am I answering the questions that are out there about the topic? So I think finding that balance for me, it's finding the balance like, well, I'm still not going to go write about things that I don't want to write about or create videos around. I want to do the things that interest me, but I want to optimize those things so that the right audience finds the content that's looking for that. And I think I can definitely improve there. Because I look at it, I don't really look at any of the negatives around it. I see that it's much more on the positive side because it's idea generation. Because we all work in tech, and in the technology industries and all the sub-industries within that space, you innovate or you die. So we're constantly thinking that way anyway in our businesses, whether your services or product or whatever you're doing. And so that's just part of it. And so this is just another tool that is forcing us to further the innovation of what we're doing around content.
You just can't let it write the blog post for you, right? It might inspire you with an idea and you build on that.
Who says you can't let it write for you?
I don't.
Well,
Have you tried it though?
Yeah.
Doing that? It's not good content.
yeah.
It's
It's
you
not
have to
my
be more
voice either. I'm a little snarky.
yes, but even though, I mean, even when I've gone in and followed guidance on building in the profile and leading up to, it still doesn't remove the human element from that.
Totally
You know,
agree.
That's why it's the 20-80-20 rule. You're going to put 20% into getting that content, and then you're going to spend 20% on the back end correcting it, getting it into your voice a little bit better.
Yeah, it does it right. It does the heavy lifting and the volume of those things, but that's why I liken it, and I made this point during the TweetJam as well, that it's more like augmented reality, AR versus a pure VR.
Yes.
Like I'm not a fan of pure VR. I don't see the value in it. I'm not just it doesn't appeal to me. Augmented reality, the technologies and the possibilities around that are amazing, and I look at this as an AR. There's a human element.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an overlay to life. That could be a tagline for a company.
Overlay.
AI.
Overlay for life.
Yeah,
There you go.
All right, could that be a sticker?
it could be.
be a
People wouldn't get it though, but yeah. I had another one where like social. Back in the social collaborative, social is replaced cotton as the fabric of our lives.
Oh, there you
Social
go.
fabric. Yeah.
Oh,
It didn't stick.
Wow.
Yeah.
pun intended.
Any other impacts? I mean, any other roles? I mean, there's certainly there's been a lot of talk around like Power Platform and going and using it to create scripts, to create workflows and things like that, and help with that. But I think somebody made the point of like code, it can generate, it can create that, but you better know what you're doing to be able to go in and edit so that you don't break something, or is it properly architected, kind of the standards that are around code creation.
Yeah, you can't assume it's going to do what it's supposed to do. You can assume
yet.
that it's going to give you a good start, but to every other point, we're still going to have to go in there and make sure that things are set up properly and created properly. I mean, I think back when I started in web design, we had WYSIWYG editors, and I wrote HTML and CSS by hand and JavaScript by hand. And then when you laid a WYSIWYG on top of that, did it make your life easier? Yes. Did it inject 1,000 lines of scripting that you probably wouldn't have put in yourself? Yes. And I think it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I think developers are going to be impacted immediately in a way that will be both negative and positive at first. It was interesting. I heard somebody talking about it, and a 10x developer told a 1x developer, all of a sudden, you're now a 10x developer overnight through this ability of interacting with ChatGPT or one of the OpenAI type setups. And the impact of that is that person didn't really have all the background, the years of training, but now they're able to leverage a tool that improves them so dramatically. So I think long term, there's a lot more positives than negatives. But in the short term, the people who don't adapt to it well, and I think you made Sharon, you made the point about Google earlier. I can remember, and I know this is just dating myself a lot, like learning all the skills of how to search Google better.
Yes.
Putting things in quotes, things like that. So you got
Boolean
context.
phrases.
Yeah, exactly. So you got all that stuff. GPT, this stuff is the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like a 0.1x developer, but I have to know enough
That's what
about
it says
the
on her
code
resume
to
anyway.
tweak it. I don't code. Girl, don't code. I don't like it. I'm a productivity person, but I'm doing SharePoint projects, and I have to go out and find these scripts for Power Automate.
Yeah.
I know enough Power Automate to be dangerous, but I have to understand what I'm putting in. If it doesn't work, I need to be able to tweak it. I can't just take what somebody else wrote.
Right.
Because their environment may be different.
Well, that's why, I flippantly say is like you can't yet. Do these roles. But you think about it, it's like the next steps are like for a tech company to go in and put the framework of proper software development in place, put all the rules, the guardrails in place for that, so it can more closely align with what that human programmer coder would go in and do. And it's going to get better and better at that thing. But you just have to remember, again, it's being programmed. Its limits are the programming, and it can learn and pick up other styles. But humans do weird things. A lot of innovation, a lot of the spark of innovation, comes out of nowhere. You might have an idea for something that's triggered by a smell rather than something you read or saw, things that are out there. The human brain is a funny thing, the way that it works.
I just want to
Crazy.
scan and defrag mine. I just
Oh,
want to scan and
defrag.
defrag my brain.
That's right.
I can't get rid of all that weird empty space.
Oh.
It is nice. That's just that's either caffeine or other products that can help with that. All right, jump to question number 3. Before implementing AI-powered productivity tools, how should organizations define their goals and determine what they hope to achieve?
Are you talking about requirements?
You could call it requirements. Sue Handley would slap your hand for saying the word requirements. She would say, "What are the outcomes?"
Well,
Sue, I've learned. I've learned.
My background is in business analysis, right? I spent a ton of time at the analyst stage. I spent a ton of time defining what is it that we're going to do: architecture, design, analysis, planning, all of that stuff. And I think, this is no different than anything else. What is it that you want to get out of it? To Sue's point, right? What is the outcome you want to achieve? What problem are you trying to solve? How are you going to go about it? And the point of requirements is to clearly define what it is we're trying to do, what outcome we want, so that we know when we're done, we have achieved the thing that we think we need.
And that's what is missing. That's kind of my point, and I made it during the TweetJam, is that if you don't define it up front and have an understanding of what it is, then how do you know that you've achieved it? How do you know that you've exceeded it or that you failed miserably? Like,
Well, I got
what
an
does it
answer.
actually need? Oh,
I got an answer.
Okay.
Isn't that enough?
yeah, 42.
42.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? I guess as I sit here and think about it, you should be able to establish whatever your baseline is, and it's no different whether it's AI or any other tool. I think about like some of the new Microsoft products that are coming in additional licenses. You're going to measure like individually, like who's getting that license, what are they doing with it,
Right.
and it really, the technology itself doesn't really matter. Is it being utilized and is it making an impact? And so if you took it away from them, would they notice? Would they care? And with something like this, they should. Like, honestly, if they're using it to its full power and its potential, like, I'm already giddy about things like meeting recap and the AI that can say, oh, I can go and join these other meetings for you and give you the intelligent recap, even though you weren't able to attend because you were triple or quadruple booked.
That never happens.
No, never. I mean, but it's there should be a point where somebody should come, like, you'll pry that from my cold dead hands kind of mindset of if you've done it well.
I feel like that about PowerPoint Designer. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, yes.
Like
Seriously.
I
Oh, yeah.
never knew that I needed that until it was there.
Yes.
And now when I open PowerPoint and you want me to design my own slides, are you kidding me?
So I think the
Or you take
official.
one of
I'm with
the
you.
original like 6 branded the water drop and
Yeah.
Like,
the
could you
back that
imagine
you
not
knew.
having PowerPoint Designer when you go to make a PowerPoint right now? I
For,
don't
for
know.
those of us, hey, look, there's those people that are out there, those freaks of nature that are really good at making PowerPoint beautiful. I mean, I'm so envious of those people, but that's why I love it too. The PowerPoint Designer, and just be like, drop a picture in, here's the content, and then it organize that. Now to be able to, in the short future, be able to leverage the AI tools with
Yep.
what Copilot is talking about. And if you've not seen yet the demos of, and there's going to be more over the next week, of course, we're going to be in Vegas next week for the M365 conference and lots of other announcements, but just what's already public that's out there around the future of Copilot. I mean, it's very exciting to see all like the new features. We all get excited about the new, but it does come back to the point you made. It's like, how does this actually change what I am being measured on?
Right.
Like I think about like a support team, like having run support operations, that's all driven on tickets, on the number of tickets, the mean time to resolution of those tickets. So that's that measurement. So anything that I would apply, any technology around that would be, can they close more tickets in a quicker, shorter time frame?
Right.
You think of design. The design process on a project basis. Is the average design phase take 3 months with all the reviews? Can we reduce that to 1 month? Look at the cost reduction. Look at the customer satisfaction numbers of that. And so there's no one metric, one way of looking at, hey, we've improved productivity. Check. Everybody is doing 120% of what they did prior to that. Like, that doesn't exist.
Right.
Because nobody tracks what they do minute by minute.
Except attorneys.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's billable.
And when it's billable time.
But a minute of time is worth 15 minutes billable. So
The journal that used to have an Outlook was great for that because you could just drag and drop, start a task, and it would track those things. But they took that away. But being able to measure what you're saying, it's subjective. I get a lot done some days. I don't get anything done other days. But I've been busy all day long, and each person's job's different. So how do you? Isn't that the next question?
Again, where you can't remove the need for good managers and actually talking with their employees, which is a whole different discussion that's out there about good management. You cannot manage by spreadsheet, period. Drop the mic.
Yep.
Cannot be done.
Cannot be done.
You have to talk to people. Don't, except not these. These are expensive mics, so we won't be dropping.
He's like, don't drop my mic.
Simulated. We'll simulate the dropping of this mic.
The
here.
producer just looked out from behind. He's like, no, don't drop the mic.
No. So, kind of related, the two other questions, building on that. Number 4 was, how does your organization track and measure individual and team productivity and efficiency today, and how will that evolve and change? So we've kind of just talked about that, but I mean,
Well, I think there's something to remember is everybody's job is different. There's, like you said, there's some there, how many tickets did I turn around? How many phone calls did I answer? But there's other ones where they're very fluid, like content creators, like how many articles did you write? Nobody knows. How many meetings did you have with your customers? There's no way to measure those things. So how
about organizations like looking at, what's out there today? Like, are any organizations, your customers, using the depth of like the insights, like the Viva insights and those things to start to measure that? Are we still too young on those things?
Like, it's starting. We start to see people who are, to your point, like Planner, Jira, things like that. There's ways to manage effort, to define like how much stuff is getting done, whether that's things that you're putting out, tickets you're doing, even like, so we have a group that we did a while back that has sales, and they manage how much time did they spend in sales activities. Through Outlook, we basically pulled it into a Power BI dashboard that shows how much time we spent on sales versus activities versus not sales activities, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things like that that are measurable. It's just a matter of how you do it. And things like insights are starting to do that. So we started using Viva Goals in our organization just to try to define like what are we trying to accomplish, how are we going to get there, and then we use Planner for a lot of our tasks so we can define, did we do the things that we're supposed to be doing to hit that goal?
Because one thing you have to be careful of, and maybe you can touch on this again, is that the level of activity doesn't equal
No.
productivity,
Right, no.
and so that's why, like in a consulting organization, you can have level of activity, which is fine, but if it's not billable, if it can't be traced back to achieving those outcomes,
Return on
then
investment,
because
ROI.
one usage of the technology is to is not maybe changing the level of activity, but making the activity more focused to redirect that so it's more outcome based.
I just find it interesting, coming from an HR background, all the layoffs that have happened in tech recently, large companies, and people they're getting leaner and leaner. People have to be more productive because that same amount of work still has to get done by fewer people. So any of the tools that we can give them to make them more productive, it behooves us, right?
Isn't that Microsoft's official tagline this year? And is the doing more with less?
Yep, they brought it back at the end of last year. So it's and and it's interesting just because here at Comms vNext we were talking about that right out of the keynote. It's that whole idea of every member of an organization has to be more productive, has to be able to generate that because there have been a lot of layoffs, and while companies have to handle that from lots of different perspectives, morale, etc., as employees and as especially if you're a leader or a manager of some sort, you've got to figure out how to have your team be productive because you're trying to make a difference in that for whatever it is. You're not just there to keep a seat warm, at least nobody I know of at this point. And so what does that look like? And so I think that's the key, that key crux is what are we doing? How do we become more efficient? And how do we become better at this stuff? For many of us, it's just honing our craft.
Yeah. Well, I do like that. I was very happy with Microsoft's acquisition, which now became, Viva Goals. So a vendor to be focused on. Having actually started my career early in my career first as a business analyst, then as a project manager, and I led up to being a consultant where I was helping companies build out PMOs, project management organizations. And so working with a couple of vendors that had project and portfolio management tools. And that's how I found my way into SharePoint. And I always like to tell this version of the story of that. I advised strongly this very large customer not to waste time with SharePoint. It was 2.0. And Project Server, which was a nightmare and never worked the way that we had hoped with all the reporting and the analytics and that side of it. And yet I then got sold on SharePoint. I kind of saw the diamond in the rough and joined Microsoft back in 2006. So that was kind of my entry point, my switch over from project and portfolio management into collaboration technology. So to see Microsoft looking at this as an important part of kind of the future technologies around Viva, that it has to be baked into the mix of these solutions to make sure that organizations are working from the same page, that you should know as an individual, what am I working on? How does that relate to what my team's goals are? How does my team's goals relate to what my organization or business unit to the company? How does all of that connect? So that I know that I'm working on something that's helping us. When Satya Nadella comes out and says, we're doing these 3 things this year, that I know my activities are driving towards 1 or 2 or maybe all 3, it makes work more meaningful. And then I also have a baseline to measure productivity. How much am I delivering on those pieces of what I own?
If you don't have a goal, like you're saying, how did you fail? Did you succeed? You don't even know. It's just Forrest Gump going out there and running until he just stopped running. Where are you going? He didn't know. He just wanted to run. Run, Forrest, run.
When I was hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went. All right, question number 5. With AI-powered analytics, How will or should organizations track collaboration, user behavior, and productivity trends? Because there was a lot of pushback around the insights. And of course, Microsoft saying, so wait a second. If you're talking about, we won't show you the detail below teams of 10, we anonymize and like do all those things. And so there's a lot of discussion around the concerns around that, but how should they be tracked? I mean, as consultants, as trainers, people are asking about this stuff,
It
right?
depends, right? Like
It depends.
That's the consulting answer.
You
There
said,
you go.
You said it. It depends on what you want out of it, and I think this is the thing. Like, I mean, we like to talk about how is AI going to solve world peace? How is AI going to solve world hunger? It's not, right? We still need to know what it is that we want out of that information. It's all data. It's all information. It's all, we have to define what is it we want, what we want to get out of it, how we're going to interpret that information. And then the AI, from an analytic perspective, from a reporting perspective, can now help us to in an easier way, understand what that information is telling us. And so I think we still need to know what it is we want out of it before we can decide how to use AI to help that along.
I think it's too early to call on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
give us another year and see how things evolve.
Well, an interesting thing happened over the last 20 years with the dramatic drop in price around storage. So companies then just realized, and it was one of the big data problems and discussions 10 years ago, was every organization, we're saving everything. Now there are security and
Retention
implications and all
policies.
those kinds of things, but in general, like they're saving all this data because they don't know what they may need out of that. Might. But one of the things that I think is really some of the demos that you see around Copilot is being able to use natural language to look at that complex data, and then you could ask to say, based on this data set, what are 3 or 4 different ways that we can, or what are the 3 or 4 different productivity, user adoption trends in this data that we should pay attention to, positive or negative? And it can go and pull all that together and highlight data, surface answers to those kinds of questions. I mean, that's incredible.
That's been a big struggle, right? That's been a big struggle in the field in general. Is when you talk to people about reporting, building reports, and managing data sets and things like that, it's a big struggle for a lot of people to understand taking the data from raw data to organized data, like data sets and data modeling into reports and graphs and dashboards that make sense, that actually answer the questions. So I think that is going to be a huge game changer for people to go in and say, how much time did my team take to accomplish this thing? Or how much time did we spend on something specific? Or how much money did we spend on this thing? Like, if you can ask those questions of a data set instead of needing to go on the back end and model it and bring it forward, I think that's going to be a game changer for reporting.
I love the insights part of Power BI where you're like, here's my data set. Show me with one little click of a button, here's all the different ways it can interpret that data. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know I needed to know that. How cool is that?
It still comes back to that last 20% though.
Yeah.
You still have to apply thought.
Right.
Don't just, you made the comment of managing by spreadsheet earlier, and you can't. You can put all the data into whatever tool you want, pull out some of those insights, whatever that might look like, but you still need to apply rational thought to it at the end of the day. Don't let it just be like I hit the easy button and now I don't have to do my job.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get answers you may not want.
Right. Or you're getting answers that are misleading.
Yes.
Right.
Because it's like, well, the data says this. Why? What's the
Your
why
team
behind
didn't
that
get
data?
anything done. Oh, did we look at the fact that it was December 25th?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I had this issue, a real world problem with a director that was upset that somebody in the operations team had the lowest number of tickets closed. It's like, yeah, but then you go and you do the data, and it's like, yeah, so they had like half of the next, the next lowest person. It's like, yeah, because this is the most senior person who was taking the hardest tickets off of everyone else's plate and was the point of contact with the product team.
Right.
So yes, so that metric failed to identify that. The other side of it is, and I say this all the time, is that once people understand how they're measured, they change their behavior to optimize against that metric.
Yes.
And that's true. When we know, it's like, I had was frustrating going and talking with salespeople and asking for their help on something that are like, sorry, can't help you. It's like, why? Because that would do nothing to help me achieve my number. The end.
Yep.
That's the number one. I work with the International Association for Microsoft Channel Partners.
Yep.
And
IAMCP, folks, if you're not familiar with that. So.
And a lot of the conversations, like how can we work with Microsoft? And like, well, you've got to figure out what their metrics are, because they're not going to loop you in if you can't help them meet their goals. They're just because they like you, want to be your friend, they're not going to make you part of it, because you've got to help them meet their goal. And they go in a hole. Starting in July every year, because they reset, and then or they surface, they all come back out around September, and then now they know how to meet their goals. So just go on vacation for the summer. And,
That is, I tell people, advising partners or people that are trying to understand the Microsoft ecosystem, but this is true for all of us. If you want to get to any of us as business owners, as managers, is that you find out what our numbers are that we're trying to achieve. And if you come to me and say, Christian, I cover North American and Asia Pacific partner management for Rencor and for my company. If you came to me and said, I can help you onboard a dozen partners this year, you will have my attention. You will have my friendship, likely.
Yeah.
you might even buy them dinner.
I might.
You might.
I've got some swag for you. Yeah.
A lot of stickers for sure.
That's true, of course. Yeah. Well, let's. So we got 2 more questions here. Number 6. How will AI-powered collaboration tools like the Microsoft Copilot help improve collaboration across the organization, enabling teams to work together more efficiently and effectively? And I know that we've talked around these things. These questions are meant to be open and broad to inspire discussion around there, and people bring different perspectives. But specifically talking about Copilot and how that works, how do you foresee that improving the way organizations work?
I think it's going to take away a lot of the simplified and redundant tasks that people do. So, we've talked a lot about like the meeting notes, for example, and transcriptions and things like that. So when you think about like stuff that people do day to day that is really unnecessary for them to do, that takes them away from focusing on the actual act of doing their job. So when we talked about it in the Women in Teams panel, is the idea of if there's somebody taking notes, often that person is missing out on being able to actually collaborate, being able to be present in the moment and
participate in that meeting. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think those types of tools like Copilot are going to allow more people to collaborate and be present so that the tool can do some of those more simple and redundant tasks.
Part of this goes back to, Adam, what you said about like the feeling like people are cheating within it, because I think part of this is, and I think, and just like
the bots are coming for us.
The PowerPoint designer side of this.
Skynet is fun.
Well, let me broaden this. So as a board member for TechieGurus.com, if you're not familiar with that, and myself, Sherry and Sharon are all content chairs for Techie Gurus and writing about Microsoft topics that are out there. I've had a couple people ask me, it's like, well, don't you fear that people are just going to go and use ChatGPT and Copilot to generate content? And my answer for that is just like using PowerPoint Designer. The goal is to communicate the message and the content that's out there. If you went and leveraged tools that help speed up the process and make your content more comprehensive, giving you ideas that you maybe use, like, hey, I hadn't thought about that, and add that in and go and leverage that technology, the end result is that it's not about whether you 100% authored every word on it yourself or not. It's, did you convey the message? Was the imagery around the presentation the right thing? Did you win over the client? Did you convey the message to the reader? Whatever that thing is. From a Techie Guru standpoint, it's like, I don't care if it's partially, if it's good content at the end. Now, we all know that, and I'll just put the challenge, the gauntlet has been thrown down, that 100% AI created content, it still has so many problems with it. Like my editorial team will catch it and be like, no, and then the edit changes the request out of that. So you're not going to remove the human element, is my point about that.
And you can use it for inspiration, but it's not your voice.
It's not.
You've got to make it your voice. And for me, I don't teach, I don't present on things I don't use. So if I can't give you some real world explanation or example, or I call them my sparklies, my gray hairs, why am I there? Somebody else can read that. Like, you've got to flesh it out.
Your unique
Context.
perspective,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
unique knowledge that can then help that to go that much further.
Yeah, and when you're collaborating with people, those people are all going to bring their own perspectives, and I think that's it. If we can get those quicker, then we're going to be more efficient.
Well, I think that's too. You think about the way Copilot works. We're not talking about saying go create something out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
Copilot in the way what's different too about the Microsoft implementation of this AI technology is that it's using the Microsoft Graph. It's using your content, your intellectual property inside your organization, leveraging then other libraries, other knowledge outside. But you can even specify where that is. And then it's less so about creating something that doesn't exist into something. And I think where most of the power really will come from initially is summarizing, digesting, synthesizing, all these other words, these management speak words, but are all true. Hashtag truth. But taking that complex data and giving it in a usable format, and that's where across every product, that's what's powerful about this. And I do agree with the statements that were made. Bill Gates made a statement about it. Several people out there made statements like, this is like the biggest thing since the invention of the PC.
Yeah.
It's massive. I don't think that's overstated.
I would agree with that.
But I don't have an opinion on it, so.
As long as Skynet, as long as it doesn't turn into Skynet, I'm happy.
I have a Skynet t-shirt already, so I think it already understands that I'm a fanboy.
Okay.
So
Do you
I
talk
think
nicely to it?
I do. I'm of course, I wouldn't.
Please and
Of
thank
course. Of course I do, as I look around.
The amount of
Sky.
time that it takes me to program, tweak, and manage a Power Virtual Agent, I feel like it's going to be a while before we have any concerns in that area.
Agreed. So I kind of left the biggest question for last. How should organizations approach data privacy, security, and the appropriate use of AI-powered collaboration tools? Little question. I
Just
know.
a small question.
Yeah.
It's always about security, and especially in certain industries. You've got intellectual property and development, financial, government. I worked a lot with Special Operations Command. That being able to search from special operations and find information, that's a little scary. These are the people that are protecting our country. So it depends, right? I think it depends on the industry.
Well, and I think, so when you think about the idea of security and governance, you have to have a plan, right? And I think this is going to expose where there is not a good plan.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is as people start to use this, because it's going to generate content quicker, because it's going to present information more. Oftentimes when I get called into somewhere is because somebody says, hey Sharon, we had to shut down our search because people are exposing information out through search that they don't want for people to find. And so I then go back and say, well, let's start back at the basics and start, what is your governance plan? What information do you want? How do you want your permissions work? How do you want to manage that content? And I think what AI can do and what Copilot will do is give people access to things so much faster and so much easier that it's then going to push us to have better security policies and better governance policies.
It's so great that you brought up that point. So, sorry, like when Fast Search was integrated in, Microsoft made that acquisition. We all were in the community. Adam, you probably didn't have some of these comments to you, but we heard from customers all over the place that were like, well, search is now just broken. It's like, no. What it did is it's working, and it's now surfacing your lack of management
Yes.
of your data.
Yep.
And so I think we're going to have
A whole nother layer
nother
of that.
experience.
Yes.
So here's my concern with that, because everything in a Microsoft 365 is security trimmed. The files are security trimmed. The directories, the sites, everything's secure. You can't find it if you don't have access to it. But
In
if
theory,
AI
yes.
But if AI is kind of mining things out of pieces and parts, is it still security trimmed?
So yes, because if it's using the Microsoft 365 APIs,
Yes.
Okay.
it's leveraging the graph, and it is using all of the data sits in those systems where the security is in place, and it utilizes, it follows, adheres to the security protocols put in place. I mean, that's one of the powerful things about it versus ChatGPT, which is out there, which is why there are people that are now going to their blogs, to their company websites, and putting script in to block the discovery of their content to these AI tools.
Yeah.
And it's similar. It's like when you're going and setting up search, you set the boundaries of that search. That what data is included within that. And then it will adhere to, if your data is striped across Exchange and SharePoint and any other libraries of data that are out there, it'll obey, follow all those rules. So you will still only see the content that you should see. But to the point Sharon and I were making, there's still going to be a more granular level, and again, it'll expose the weaknesses of organizations that have been lax in their governance.
And I think there's going to be a big rise in people who need things like assistance with DLP and assistance with information rights management and assistance with content management and information architecture. Because, I don't think people have really gotten lazy. I think a lot of people get really frustrated because I talk to them and they're like, well, we did the best we could. I don't think it's that people didn't mean well or didn't
Right.
do it. I just think that they didn't have the bandwidth and the knowledge and
Right.
the impetus
Right.
to properly architect and manage all of that stuff to begin with. So now it's going to force them to do that.
Oh, I totally agree. So my comment on this was, as I was sitting here thinking and listening to y'all, it was really interesting because I'm like, Sharon specifically, you work with this a lot. And as an organization that works more on the voice and the communication side, and I see a lot of value in all of this for that, as I sit here and look at it and think about what you were talking about, I'm like, how many companies really have done this? Like have even thought about this? Not take the AI portion out,
Yeah, right.
Like just take the data security and privacy and everything. And I think it's a small number.
Very small.
Only thing I would modify there is that you say like which companies?
Yeah.
Usually the ones that just went through a breach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I talk about this all the time in from the communication side of the security and things of that nature. And, we see some of that same things, like there's different regulatory aspects that we have to do things within. And sometimes we actually get companies that are like, the fine's cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the fine you're worried about. I mean, look, there's a lot of data that's out there. I mean, overwhelmingly, the cost of data breach impacts the smaller and mid-sized company over the
Absolutely.
enterprises. So sometimes it is cheaper to pay the fine for the enterprise, but for an SMB, it could
and even with the
destroy the
SMB,
business.
it goes back to your point. It's not that they're willfully not doing it.
Right.
It's an awareness.
Yep.
It's an initiative-based issue, right? So when you think about, for example, you get a company out there whose insurance company calls them and says,
Right.
we are no longer going to issue you your security
Yes.
insurance because you are not meeting XYZ criteria. Maybe they haven't been breached, but their risk level is so high that now
Right.
their insurance is telling them no. Now all of a sudden the executives are like, we care. Now we're going to create an initiative. Now we're going to do it. And I think what's going to happen with all of this stuff coming in is it's going to accelerate those types of things happening because you're going to raise the risk by a multiplier that's enough that those types of things are going to start mattering more than they do now. And no, to your point, I absolutely don't think that very many companies think about this. I think they know it's there, but I don't think they invest in it. I don't think they prioritize, and I don't think they value it. And I will plug, so I've been part of the Microsoft Maturity Model team for several years now. And if you guys go out there and look up the PMP Microsoft Maturity Model calls, we talk about this because we talk about where are you in different areas. In security and compliance, this is one of the ones where people have probably the lowest score across the board.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's a great discussion area. That's
could be a whole nother
unfortunately
TweetJam.
of course they schedule those calls right in the middle of my other team meeting calls, so that's always the impact. But
We do record them. You can watch them on
Say
YouTube.
I know, which
Tuesday
is-
or Thursday mornings and like that specific time slot that's Microsoft's favorite time slots.
of course
You can take the recording and have them extract and give you the.
there you go. It's like in those three bullets.
Read the transcript.
That's
Read
right.
the transcript.
These are the 5 things you need to know about this hour and a half meeting.
Well, thank you all of you for participating. Obviously, thank you for the ongoing participation in the Collab Talk Tweet Jams, and just again, I want to thank Comms vNext, the event, for sponsoring. This is actually the second Tweet Jam that they sponsored. It's great to be here in person and do this post-TweetJam interview, but also to Techie Gurus and Tygraph for sponsoring, ongoing sponsorship of this. And for those that are interested, our next Tweet Jam, I always like to have the published date and topic out there. We'll be back on May 24th, and the topic will be the future of SharePoint. Because there's major announcements that are happening next week around SharePoint. There's going to be a lot to talk about. So you can find us, it's always, May 24th, always at 9 a.m. Pacific. Sorry to my friends out in Asia Pacific that's at like 2 in the morning.
Gosh.
Sorry. But we do occasionally have people that stay awake or wake up early and join these discussions depending on the topic. But again, it's out on Twitter. Anybody can follow me at Buckley Planet, or the follow along. You can find it just on the Collab Talk hashtag out on Twitter. And thank you so much, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've always been a great host.
Well, thank you. It's what I'm
No,
what I'm
thank
paid to
you.
do. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.